Hey, I'm back with another video. It's 10:27 a.m. It is March 28th and it's Friday morning and I am remaking this part of the video. I can't believe it took me this long just to restart this video. I think it's because I realized that this video is going to be somewhat long because I've been doing a lot of thinking again, okay, and it just flows in and pieces start coming together and it just makes sense for me to share it because how else am I going to release all of this, I firstly want to say that, I do plan on getting out of the house a little bit later because, it's important for me to not be in the same spot, okay? I think this whole issue about mental illness, or we're talking more about mental health, which is really important. And, I've talked or try to share ways of dealing with it. And sometimes it's about changing your environment to the best of your ability. Obviously, we live in one spot. I'm going to tell you, there was a time where I used to move a lot. And yes, it was an inconvenience. And yes, it was very taxing and draining. Okay, a lot of it had to do with me being a targeted individual. I've never had a stable life. Okay, but, me moving around did give me the ability to change my environment, shift modes a little bit. I'm in a different house. I can, change it, arrange the furniture a little bit differently. It was always something that I could do a little bit different, which helped me. That was the one thing that also helped me survive and deal with my depression. Okay. It's like, I can't just pick up and move my apartment or whatever. And, I do have my apartment with my son. So he kind of hangs out in the back, on the downstairs, and then I pretty much dominate the upstairs. Okay, that is in case he wants to take a shower. There is like a half bathroom downstairs, but he has to come upstairs to take a shower. So that's the living arrangement, right? So you know, I don't really have like, a place to go outside right now. My patio is like still a mess, which is really kind of getting to me because I really want to make things beautiful. I want things to be beautified as much as I possibly can to raise the mood. Now, I want to talk a little bit in this video, and actually, I want to talk a lot in this video because it's kind of a mental dump for me um, because I have a lot on my mind, and a lot of it is very spiritual, and a lot of it is also political. And see, I've always believed that those two do not mix, and the reason why they don't mix because, and it's written, you know, that it shouldn't be. For the reason why is because people can become um, like, and I really want to emphasize that I want peace with the Mormon Church, okay? But I cannot ignore the fact that this has affected so many people, and it is the reason, um, the undercurrent that I was talking about in one of my videos. I don't even know if I posted that video or not, but it is one of the main um, forms of wickedness that has been allowed to thrive in silence, but well known, to be in silence, but be well known um, to many people. Okay, anything that operates in silence but is well known to people, this is a form of brainwashing. Like people knew who was targeting me, they knew this, but they were committed to keeping silent. And then also, what else do I want to talk about? Yeah, so what it is that I want to talk a little bit about, you know, what I've been thinking about, and I kept thinking, well, this is going to be a long one because I know that there's been times where I've made videos, and it's like there's just one slide to the entire video, and then the video ends up being like 2 hours long. It's like I understand that visuals are just as important as having, the audio, okay? But I tend to forget that, right? Because I myself am more of an audio person, okay? And this is one of the reasons why I like music so much. And there's been times in the past where I've watched movies and I don't even need to watch the actual movie. I can just sit on my couch facing the other direction and hear the voices, and then I start putting people that I want in the movie. I've done that before, okay? Don't get me wrong, I can appreciate actors and stuff like that. But me being able to see, what's going on, or learning through seeing or whatever, is not necessarily a requirement of mine. Okay, so anyway, not to say that I don't appreciate singing, okay, because I love the bright sun, I love the beautiful flowers, I love, love, love that stuff. Okay, I think you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so this picture is a something I snagged off the internet, right? Because I wanted to show something that represented paradise. I had mentioned, growing up, me studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, and Jehovah's Witnesses, I would say, and I had mentioned before that many religions, the founders were members of Freemasonry, and I would say Charles Taze Russell, even though he did not call himself a Jehovah's Witness, he was actually affiliated with, I believe, the Bible students at that time, and then it evolved into Jehovah's Witnesses. I do believe that he knew a lot about the whole cloning thing. I really do. When I think about it, because when I think about how that religion was established and what it kind of, focuses on, and their focus is that they're coming back here on Earth, okay? Bringing people back and people living for eternity on paradise on Earth. Now, I had mentioned before that I do not believe that the monetary system will ever go away. It's something that we are dealing with. I personally could deal with the monetary, just like living on a paradise on Earth, walking around, eating apples off the tree, smelling beautiful flowers, because this is what they talked about. They talked about in paradise on Earth that, just seemed like it was just lush and everybody had their space, like everybody had enough room, people were fully satisfied, okay? And that part, I even think is a little difficult to really achieve, but this is what we're trying to do, or at least I'm trying to do, that I'm inspired to do, okay? Yeah, that's what it is, because what is the pain and struggle of every man is dissatisfaction, not having enough, okay? So the idea of a paradise on earth is to be pleasing and to satisfy the wants and desires of every man. Okay, how can you do that, right? How can you do that? There has to be some sort of economy, unfortunately. There has to be some sort of economy, but we have to have like the influx and the outflow of money. This is how we operate, okay? But like I said, is it possible to live without the monetary system where everybody just has their own piece of land and whatever? If that was to happen, whether it was to happen or not, right? Which I don't think we are ever going to get rid of the monetary system, because I believe that there's some sort of power that's beyond our control that just operates it that way, okay? And if they want to, they fine, but let's not count on that, okay? So let's just, we have to deal with the fact that, somehow we're going to have to make a living, okay? But yeah, I mean, I'm being realistic when I talk about, calling the human scrap heap. There's too much of the undercurrent, and the idea is to live in, okay, maybe it can't be paradise, like, that great, that lush, to where everybody's not even worried about having to go to work or whatever. But it should be an ease to our soul. It should be something that we find satisfaction in doing. It's removing the old structures of how life was in the old system and bringing in the new. Now, I do believe that there is an element of truth in every religion, okay? And this is the reason why I get upset when people argue about it. Just like Charles Taze Russell, he was aware that there were clones. He was aware of them. He was aware of them, and he was talking about them. He never mentioned them by name. See, this is the stuff that people in their little secret club knew about, right? But when they watered their religion down and talked to people about these spiritual messages, they were just telling them things that were broken down in symbols or whatever. Like, we couldn't fully understand what they were talking about. But this is probably what they're talking about. You know what I mean? So, anyway, to make life better on the new earth, because some people do want to come back as clones. Some people want a second chance. Some people want a third chance. Some people love this plane of existence. But I personally look at, coming back to this plane of existence as some sort of horror nightmare story. Okay, because C.B. Braganza took himself out in 1956, only to come back in 1971. So I must have come back for a reason. Okay, because I will tell you, going back to how the earth is now, or how it has been, okay, because I'm going to tell you, I do feel a shift of energy. I see something positive. Think something positive is coming over. I do feel that, okay, but the momentum has to continue. It has to continue, and it has to build, right? But yeah, the way that the earth is, it seems like people keep coming back over and over and over again to a whole pile of nothing. Okay, so somebody is benefiting from the cloning system, and that person who was the group that was benefiting from the cloning system would be the Mormon Church. Okay, and so it needed to be rebuilt. It needed to be rebuilt because I must be here to bring about this new earth. It must be. I mean, because look at everything that's happened. So I'm coming to this realization, and I've been thinking, and I want to share that with the video. Okay, so I talked about economics. Okay, economics right now, we know a lot of people have taken a hit, and people are doing their boycotts, at least the last time I looked at it on the news. Okay, right now, the news freaks me out, and so I've been ignorant of the news for like the last 5 days on purpose, okay, because there's a lot of triggers right now that I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with a lot of triggers right now. Okay, and this might be one of the reasons why when I was young, I didn't want to deal with politics or the world around me, because I am a thinker. And once I'm aware of stuff, I don't sleep. I think about stuff, nitpick things, analyze things, dissect things. This is what I do. So I was happy being ignorant about those things. I mean, it's not that I wasn't ignorant of them. I just didn't want to know that they were actually happening. Okay, now I'm aware. I mean, like, I'm so aware of what's going on now, and I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so I believe that I must be the chosen one. Let me see here. Let me switch sides. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, I don't want to take too long. I'm somebody who could take forever making a video, but anyway, I was wanting to talk about the moral reset that I was committed to working on and wanting to have done by May 1st of 2025. And I'm going to be posting it as I normally do, but what I think is important is that people understand the importance of psychology and the legal issues resulting from certain kinds of individuals. Now, and the reason why I'm showing this slide in polka dot is because I remember, this is my homage to McGraw-Hill. I know this is really silly, but this is how I kind of express like my admiration for certain things or whatever. And I don't even know if McGraw-Hill's still around or not, whatever. But throughout my life, because I never had what you call like, the brick and mortar education from like, the schools, because of me being bullied, right? I have collected a shitload of McGraw-Hill material throughout my entire life, okay? And I have their textbooks. I had a lot of them. I had to throw away a lot of stuff, okay? And so I wanted to kind of imitate one of their covers of their books that I remember for my moral reset. I wanted to make it look kind of like the cover of one of their books. Yes, I am quite familiar with that company, and I was quite happy to work for McGraw-Hill when I was hired at KERO, even though they were not really connected. I don't know why. As a nerd, I guess I'm just a McGraw-Hill junkie, and I somehow want to show my respects for the education that their books provided me. Anyway, yeah, that will be hopefully done by the 1st. I'm working like crazy trying to get things done, and I am doing a lot of spacing out unnecessarily. Well, actually, it's not unnecessary. I cannot help these downloads, and I have to pay attention to what's going on because the messages that come to me are relevant, and I feel like they need to be shared. So yeah, it's not just wasting time, but it is kind of wasting time because sometimes my downloads affect my schedule. It is what it is. Okay, now this slide right here, it really does remind me of like McGraw-Hill, a McGraw-Hill cover of their old hardbook bound textbooks. But anyway, that's I chose it that way on purpose because this is how I view and look and reminds me of education, and I've collected their books like, it's just I'm a junkie. I love McGraw-Hill. Anyway, going back to this particular slide that I chose. I wanted to talk about the signs of human trafficking. And I understand that a lot of people are starting to become aware of what it looks like based on my story. Okay. And this is exactly what it is. It is the manipulation of and control of another person and sometimes another group. Okay. And it looks in like many different ways. I think I did a video on human trafficking. At least I did a video on gang stalking. They're very similar. And isolation is one of the tactics that they use, and as well as rumor campaigns. Okay, in this case, and a lot of times this is how they uh, prevent people from, associating with this person. Their goal is to make sure that this person has no power structure, no support. Okay, so the slander campaign is necessary. What bothered me so much is that, this is a religious organization who targeted me through my bloodline, for my bloodline, and people could not recognize that. Okay, but anyway, but there's different kinds. For sometimes it's about bloodlines, and that was my case. But for some other people, like, people who just the regular people that we see every day, have all kinds of problems. They may have being running away from their abusive husband or trying to run away. They may be trying to, run for safety, and unfortunately, they're not able to get the assistance that they really need because people do not realize or recognize the signs of human trafficking. I will tell you, the numbers are vast of people who are abused every day and are victims of human trafficking. So yeah, I want to do more videos about how to identify big victims, and at least maybe people will start doing educational videos, because that was what I was wanting to do. I wanted to do educational videos and do, because during my targeting, I was just thinking, okay, how am I going to survive? This isn't going to work out. They're going to block me here. I tried just all kinds of different ideas, and I knew after a while that it was pointless to try to do anything because this group, the Mormons, were blocking every single thing that I tried to do. Okay, but do I think it's important to educate people on human trafficking? Yes, I do. Okay, and a lot of people are victims of human trafficking and are not aware, but they certainly are aware of the fact that they are dealing with extreme anxiety more than any that is even imaginable. Okay, and this is probably the reason. Anyway, but yes, I do think, and I'm just one person. I can only do so much, but the education about human trafficking and this is a part of the moral reset. Okay, I'm talking about the education of human trafficking, looking for signs of human trafficking, and what's really important is the third one is getting more support for the victims. There's not enough support for the victims. Why? Because they thought that the church had the authority to do what they did. Who was going to come up against the Mormon church? See, this is the problem. Okay, this is the undercurrent. And, let me tell you, I respect people who try to serve God, but sometimes, because it's human nature to want to be admired, because it is human nature to want to exert power at times. It is human nature. Everything that we deal with is something that relates to nature. It's natural. This kind of these conflicts are natural. Okay, this is if somebody wants to do it, but they're not doing it the civilized way. That is the only thing. Okay, so this is where I'm talking about psychology, understanding this, how people work, how they operate, and even somehow in my own way relating and understanding through empathy. I understand. Okay, it's important. Psychology is important, and I do think it plays a vital role in society as well as law. Okay. And so I'm going to go into that in just a minute. But as far as getting more support for victims, yeah, there needs to be more education on how to deal with trauma. And I understand that not every organization could, um, solve each and every person's trauma, but there should be some, open platform and discussions about people who are victims of human trafficking for different reasons. Okay, like I said, sometimes people are, running away from their ex-spouses. Sometimes people are dealing with religious abuse, which is what I realize now that I have suffered through religious abuse. And the shocking part is that you can be a sufferer of a sufferer of religious abuse and not even have to be one of the members. Okay, there's a lot of people who are targeted individuals and cannot seem to understand why things just are not working out for them in their life because of this evil undercurrent that needed to be called out, identified, and eradicated. So yeah, going back to the idea of my bloodline, do I believe that my politics, even though I hate the word politics. I do. I hate the word politics. Like I said, I know growing up, politics was just petty arguments that people wanted to start with me. Just their little dirty, digs that they wanted to make, or use politics as an excuse to hide their, racism or their preference for women to stay at home or some bullshit that they had personally against me. They wanted to, use politics or political figures to do that, whatever. Okay, but I do believe in my way of life. Okay, this is one of the reasons why I've always chosen to just kind of keep off to myself, mainly because I didn't realize that some of these people that were coming into my life were setups by the Mormon Church. But I do now realize that, that at the time I did realize that it's a little bizarre. You know what I mean? That people would just like be so nitpicky, or they would try to be really, really overly nice at first, and then they would turn to monsters. And now I understand that these people were being operated. But anyway, yeah, my politics are in line with humanity. I think my viewpoints agree to just about everybody because I am not showing any sort of favoritism in my life as someone who is different and did not have the stable foundation of anything or anybody. I have learned to adapt, which is quite remarkable. This is just one of the many reasons why this has attracted the attention of the bloodlines that was basically trying to move me down from like the very beginning. I kid you not. Okay. Yeah, bloodline targeting is heavy. And I did mention that, I believe that, what is her name? I keep forgetting. I did a video on her. I believe she was the clone of Mary of Scots. She was the character that they covered. Eileen Wardorf, I believe that she was a bloodline targeted. I do not believe that she was a stupid woman by any means. I do not believe that she was a stupid woman by any means. But I do believe that she was somebody who was targeted by bloodline targeted and put in unfair situations because I find it very odd that by the age of 13 that she's sitting here living out in the street, where in the world is her family? You know what I mean? It just seems very unlikely. And I will tell you that her ending did not end well. This woman went down for a group of people who were happy to let her take the blame for it. Okay, and I understand this is one of the reasons why they work in the shadows. I understand that there is peace among these people, but I'm letting you understand what darkness looks like. And I want people to be able to realize when this sort of stuff happens, how to identify it, because people were brainwashed for a very long time. And now we are at a time where people are becoming more aware of this. Anyway, yes, psychology and law is something that I believe is important to run just about any society, whether that be the micro or macro level, okay, whether that be within the office or it be a country or it be the world. Okay, if we really want to deal with peace, peace really does not start with hoping that a group gets it together. It breaks down to individuals who get together and create more, like large, vast amounts of mental illness, because the mental illness, the envy, the jealousy, the cutthroat behavior, it can fester and it can become something so big that we deal with something as corrupt, okay, as the Mormon Church. Now, like I said, who's to say Joseph Smith may have he was a man of his time, okay? And I understand that because people have always, respected, loved their bloodline so much that they have always looked down on anybody that did not look like them, including, people like myself, you know. But I understand that, that does not mean that he did not have any vision. It doesn't mean that through his evolution of trying to reach an understanding of God or the universe or whatever, that he may have, not have been somebody who received that. I'm not saying that. I am saying that the need for power and control is very dangerous. Okay? And this is what I'm talking about. This kind of power and control. Okay? This is the sort of thing that is wrong. Okay? It is not dominance that creates peace on the earth or benefits mankind on any level. It is not the way. Okay, it causes resentment, it causes heart attacks, it causes people loss of life and whatever. And see, what scares me about Mormonism and the understanding of the genealogy of certain people, it's like, oh my God, when I heard that, they were bringing back, or like doing these baptisms of the dead for Jewish people, when Jewish people are making it very clear, I don't want anybody messing around with me after I die, and these people overstep their boundaries. And to me, what you do is terrifying. It's terrifying. Okay, what exactly are and who exactly are you? And this is what makes people fear. They fear what you do. You are a tormentor. You are a torturer. Okay, and this is why I'm needing to say it. And yes, I'm saying it not to bring up an argument. I am saying it because I have carried not just one lifetime, but apparently my C.B. Berganza existence was somebody who was severely traumatized. Severely traumatized. So yes, psychology and law is important to operate a society. Okay, so now going back to this idea of the chosen one, I have to say that, when these things flash through my mind, I try really hard to ask myself, okay, am I just hanging out in my room a little bit too much or something? Is something like, because I understand, solitude could create things like delusions of grandeur and stuff like that. But I realize, I must be because, I'm looking back at all of this and I feel very strongly about my other intuitive messages about C.B. Berganza. And I had already thought there was a possibility that I was King Solomon, a little shortly after I realized that I was C.B. Berganza and how this whole cloning thing worked. But I was thinking, when I was younger, I kind of read over, so and so, the lineage. Okay, I think that's one of the things a lot of people laugh about when they talk about the Bible because they will talk, well, so and so begot so and so, and Jeroboam, and blah, 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 blah. And just all the way down the line, you're like, you can't really expect me to remember all of that, right? Right? But anyway, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people find the Bible very like a stumbling block because there's a lot of things that they just read, but they don't really want to, try to pick it apart. But apparently, the genealogy is what it is. And so, the Savior was supposed to come out of the line of David, okay? And I believe that because I'm King Solomon, while King Solomon was obviously the son of David, I was descended upon the line of King David because I'm basically someone who doesn't have earthly origins. I fell upon the son of David's bloodline. So it's not really bloodline, it's more about me being placed within this group of people. But anyway, related to David, somehow or another, there is some sort of connection with the royal family that we're somehow related in some very, very strange way. I talked about the modification of what they do to clones, okay? Now, I like who I am. Okay, and I think might be one of the reasons why Mormons hate me so much, because they wanted me to be absolutely ruined. They did not like the fact they could not stand black people, and I learned to love myself. Okay, because I know the mental conditioning when I was younger. They were constantly feeding, and I think a lot of the racism that was fueled by Mormonism. I do understand the Mormonism's or should I say Mormons' influence in Hollywood at that time or whatever. So I do think that they had a huge play in the industry. There was a lot of subtle forms of racism. And growing up, I would say, especially me being, the minority, it was very difficult for me to feel comfortable with it. And as I got older, I realized the kind of game that was being played. And I was like, no, I don't really think so. I've completely accepted who I am. You know what I mean? And I love who I am. Okay. But do I believe that I was manufactured, possibly, with the darker skin as to resemble a black person just for possibly their entertainment? That could very well be. That could very well be. I am here to reveal truth and possibilities of people thinking and opening their mind to the truth. To the truth. And see, I want to go a little bit more into, this whole idea of me being, the savior. But I mean, I used to think when I was a little kid, because I was always interested in biblical prophecy as a child, mainly because, that stuff dealt with the supernatural. You know what I mean? So I've often wanted to read and study bits and pieces. So when I started studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, it made me read the Bible more frequently or constantly. And of course, along with their study aids. The study aids was more for me to, see things their way. So there's a little bit of indoctrination, to try to see things their specific way. And same thing with Mormonism. Mormonism, when I was growing up, was way different than what they would call regular Christianity, because Christianity believed that the Bible was complete, the Old and the New, and those two testaments bound together were complete Word of God. And so now we have Mormonism, and they had this, what they called it, I guess what other people looked upon as a third testament. They had the Book of Mormon. And so this angered and pissed off, regular so-called Christians, because they thought, what in the world were you doing? Okay. But whatever. Okay, I think that perhaps maybe some of their prophets wanted to write their own version of what was going on at that time. Whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I fully understand. I do live a certain life, okay? I never try to force people on it. But people backed me into this corner. Like I said, this whole bloodline targeting is the story of the Bible, or the prophetic parts of the Bible, I believe are written accounts or this playbook constantly being played over and over and over again. Like some sort of ritual or some sort of pretend game, or that we're like a reset constantly over. Let's do this over again, and we'll do the same fight over again, to see who the chosen one is. And I'm going to tell you, now is a time for peace, because I think right now what's going on right on Earth is like a spiritual awakening. We are talking about things we never really talked about before. Religions that were originated or associated with, things like Freemasonry, which is basically the craft. And then they'd water down like sacred knowledge and give people these little religions. Okay, people are starting to see through that now. Okay, people who are on the higher upper chain, like, who are, like, I'm talking of royal blood, are actually listening to this now. And they're not getting offended. People want to know. People want to know. Let's get down to the origin. Okay, right now we are in a time of transition, and it's a very spiritual time. Very spiritual time. Okay, so I wanted to talk about human trafficking a little bit more in this brief little clip, because I really want to get ready to go to the library and get some space here. But I do get the feeling that this is intuitive, but I've had this feeling for quite a while. I think it's probably sometime around 2023. I mentioned it off and on in some of my videos, but I get the feeling that that celebrities, as we know them, some of them are living as slaves, and they are ignorant, and they are dependent upon abusive handlers. And I've made the statement, and I may have even pissed some of these celebrities off because they did not see it this way when I said it, okay? And this very well could have been one of the reasons why my targeting was escalated at certain times, okay? Because oftentimes people hear the truth and they are not ready to hear it. They are not ready to accept it, okay? One of the reasons why I resent people talking about woke culture or pointing the finger and calling people woke or whatever is that right there is a sign of the indoctrination that many people have received from the Mormon Church and religious organizations like the Mormon Church. Okay, why is it wrong to know the truth and the root of a foundation? Why are they so adamant about squashing the voice of people who are speaking the truth? Okay, so what that word is, and by using that is, and by having a lot of celebrities repeating this, okay, because the celebrities oftentimes are in positions where they are not allowed to know anything. This is one of the reasons why they are isolated in the first place. They want to control what you know, who comes in your life, what you say, and what you do, right? So many of these people are, okay, and human trafficking is actually, talked about enough now that they have a definition for it on Wikipedia. And this is like a little snippet that I have of human trafficking. And of course, there's different kinds of human trafficking that needs to be discussed. But yes, do I believe that, people such as Network Billionaire Boy and some of the other people that, are having to put on faces for the public could possibly be puppets for the Mormon Church? Do I believe that goes on? Yes, I do. Okay, for somebody who can study your genealogy and want to constantly abuse you in situations, especially where they have the power to create new yous, you know what I'm talking about? To use, this is a form of abuse, and to me, it resembles something very hellish, like something impish. And this is the reason I'm going to tell you something. I am somebody who can feel pain, okay, just by thinking about the pain. Okay, this is the reason why when I was telling you a few years ago when I made the video about when I was talking to my sister Lisa about me not being able to find a job, and when she was lying to me, how it hurt me because I loved my sister. My sister was in full knowledge of what I needed to live, and she knew she could help me, but she would not. Something was going on, and it was killing me. And not only was that her what she was doing breaking my heart, I could physically, it felt like somebody was throwing glass shards into my brain. It hurt that bad, okay? And I sat there and I took it out on my sister, which rightfully so. But you know who really deserved to be cut down? The Mormon Church. Okay, they have been responsible for the slavery of many people. Now, as I had mentioned, I'm somebody who rips like images off the internet because, I'm not somebody who's going to graph all that by myself, right? But this one particular slide I thought was useful because it does talk about, kind of briefly touches on the different varieties of human trafficking. Like at the very top on the left-hand side, it says 1 in 6 endangered runaways reported in the U.S. are likely to become sex traffic victims. Sex trafficking has a wide, broad definition, and forced marriages, that kind of thing falls into that category. But there's a lot of people who go missing. Okay, I'm talking about missing people. Okay, people who never show up. You know what I'm talking about, that go missing and are being made into prostitutes or being forced into marriage, children being forced to be married to older men, this sort of stuff. This is another form of human trafficking, okay? There's trafficking that's going on right in front of people's faces. Oftentimes, this kind of trafficking is going on in front of people's faces. This kind of stuff's happening at airports. This kind of stuff is happening in taxi cabs, whatever. This kind of stuff happens. And so what happens is it looks so normal to people outside that they're not in positions to help. Okay. Anyway, on the other side, it says 21 million people worldwide are now victims of forced labor. Okay, I told you, one of the main religions, okay, that are driving to create some sort of agenda, forcing people into marriages, dictating how people live, is the Mormon Church. They're not just riding their bicycles in the United States. They make a mission. They're proud of going on their missions, corrupting the minds of other people. Okay, 21 million people worldwide are now victims of forced labor. This could be one of the reasons why I have walked into jobs where they're just absolute nightmare with their toxicity. Okay, look how many people are working in jobs and dealing with toxicity. Okay, Mormons have, I know they owned a lot when I was growing up. Okay, I mentioned Alpha Beta, but growing up in the 70s and 80s, Alpha Beta and then Smith's Food King was huge. Okay, as a matter of fact, these big conglomerates are the things that ate up our American dream. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there, and I hate going there, but I'm gonna go there. These kind of conglomerates are the things that ate up the American dream. There's not a warehouse. There's not a donut shop. There's not a bicycle shop. Everything's molded into one big thing you buy online and all this other stuff. And their dominance has wiped out people. It is what it is, okay? And now you can't have your American dream. You're forced to work for them as slaves. What? Okay, anyway, migrants are particularly vulnerable to forced labor practices. Female victims forced into domestic servitude are often sexually exploited as well. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about, migrants and people who are in unfortunate positions. I'm going to tell you, you need to keep your business to yourself. You need to keep your business to yourself. One of the things that people want to do when they target you is they want to find something that they could have on you. This is one of the reasons why, and I'm not bashing the Mormon Church. I'm telling you this because I'm trying to make people aware of what to look for. Okay? Now I'm going to wrap this one up because this mystery up, because there was a day that I was talking about many years ago. It was right around 2012. Okay, this is the last time I actually had my hair with braids, like those micro braids, those long braids, those Egyptian braids, those like beautiful braids. Okay, I was in the park feeding and watching the squirrels, minding my own business. And somebody comes running, this white dude comes running down. He's like, they're after you, but you got him. I'm like, what are you talking about? I remember talking about this issue. Okay, I have been watched and followed by these people for a long time, mainly because of the connection of the Mumas and the Braganza connection. Okay, but the thing is that what he was trying to say is they were trying to find dirt on me. Okay, so the dirt that they were so happy and joyful and giddy about was the fact that I was running from them for years. This is one of the reasons why I didn't finish school. Okay, not the formal way. I mean, many years later, I got my general education and then I took some college courses. But for the most part, yeah, I've been a target from these people, and their abuse is extreme. And their abuse is extreme and it's vast. I want to think about the numbers of people who are burnt out dealing with abusive bosses who are adamant about wanting some sort of unreasonable control. Okay, like I was talking about this beautiful girl who made this video about her dealing with a boss who wants her to have this bizarre control. This agenda of trying to Mormonize people who are not even members, such as myself, is huge, and it's creeping into the workplace. This is one of the reasons why we're dealing with the removal of the DEI for some people. Okay, so yeah, I thought this was an appropriate side because human trafficking is huge. Okay, huge. Okay, and I know that many times, certain organizations do not understand exactly what they're good for because they are not immune to being fooled by these professional con artists that they call religions. Okay, so they'll participate in it, and here's the thing. My goal in this moral reset is to make people aware of dual associations. Dual associations. You've heard the expression guilty by association. Guilty by association. You know why people think Freemasons are garbage? Because we had some misbehaving Mormons act out of line of a doctrine or idea system that they were supposed to adhere to. If their religion, their main foundation is not that restrictive, why do they restrict? Why did they expect this sort of obeisance from the average person who attends their church? This is not me digging at Mormonism. I'm talking about analyzing the actions of people who are supposed to uphold a spiritual doctrine. Their words better be in line with how they're leading their flock. Do you understand what I'm talking about? This is important. And see, when you start thinking of these lines, these knowledge that you have a required and applying it to your life, things just become so much easier. Okay, so I want to talk about the after effects of all of this because, the last slide, indicates that a lot of people are being trafficked. The pressure of having to have unreasonable demands placed upon you, basically because, given the choice, you would not be having to be put in that situation. We are forced oftentimes through the employment system. Like I said, there is no American dream for the majority of the people because, we have these big companies absorbing all of our American dreams, and then we are being forced to work for these people, okay, which has taken its toll, okay, which has affected the spirit and the overall outcome or the overall happiness of people, okay. So I feel as though, this influence had to be identified, and hopefully as we move forward, things can be better. There is going to be a lot of people who are dealing with mental trauma. Like I said, you do not have to be a member of the Mormon Church to express or experience the feelings of and the result of religious abuse. And what you're seeing here is an illustration of the different things. Like I deal with PTSD all the time. You know what I mean? The very fact that I can't sleep, I'm agitated all the time. I have the urge to want to express my feelings. I deal with triggers a lot. I have to deal with a lot of triggers. Just recently I was going on my webpage, like for email, and they were trying to show some sort of Mormon church history type thing, and I immediately right now, for the last few days, I have been very triggered by images of Mormons, topic discussion of Mormons, because it's becoming very clear that I was abused, and the abuse is coming to the forefront very, very, very clearly because I understand that these people plowed my father down, and I knew the trauma that he experienced, the torment and the torture that he experienced, and seeing my father cry for the very first time in my life when my father was a 6'2" black dude who always held it together, I realized the evil that these people were able to cause. Okay, and then the struggles that I've had to deal with my entire life, and then trying to bully me for being, how dare I survive? Because like I said, going back from in the schoolyard and stuff, these people wanted me dead a long time ago. This was bloodline targeting, and these people wanted to win. This is what's so shocking to me, because to me, I had a cute little face as a kid. How could you be so cruel to a child? Okay, but this is very eye-opening to me. Okay, that you're willing to watch somebody come to the realization that they don't have a family, that they're basically an orphan, and you're okay. You just want to drive it. I understand that you are motivated by money, or you were motivated by money, but you have destroyed the lives of so many people. And it has to stop because the new earth has to be formulated. It has to. And right now is a time of awakening. It's a time of understanding who and how this infiltrates into the system. And so that people need to wake up and be aware of it. Be aware of it, identify it, and make other choices. You don't want this sort of manipulative type person to be in your friendship circles. You do not want to put up with this sort of stuff. If you see this sort of stuff going on in your church, you should address your pastor. It doesn't mean that you have to close doors, but your pastor really does have to answer for his actions. Okay, who exactly is he pleasing when he's doing this sort of stuff? Okay, it's not for your well-being. No one has the right to create these sort of covert operations to cause this kind of destruction. They just don't. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up this video. I needed to say that. I'm gonna go get myself together and head to the library, but I did want to share one intuitive message that I wanted to share for some reason. Okay, actually I wrote a few messages down here. Okay, number one is they fear knowledge because then you know, and that is what they don't want. Whoever is controlling things behind the scenes. So knowledge is something that threatens people who like to traffic other people. Okay, these covert operations that work behind the scenes. Okay, these kind of infiltrators that manipulate the employment sector. They manipulate uh, social media platforms or platforms that can be monetized. Okay, this is the comeback and response to when you find out and start asking questions. Just like, they're going to call me woke because I question, why is it this whole thing about my education and certain standards and conducts of certain conduct or standards of living were not in any of my contracts with Kofi or Patreon. Okay, I'm questioning that. Okay, because they're not allowing me to make any sort of money because I was supposed to be up to a certain standard. Okay, whose standard? Do the Mormon church own things like Patreon and Kofi? Okay, is there somebody in a position to create other social platforms that are more opening and mind expansion, like who to things that are not willing to associate with this form of agenda? Okay, because this agenda is huge. I'm going to tell you right now. If they are closing off employment opportunities and then singling out people who can and cannot get good coverage for social media or platforms or whatever, that's something that needs to be considered. What exactly are they doing? Okay, they're trying to promote some sort of agenda to squash out people. Okay, and I said, I'm not somebody who thinks the idea of squashing out certain people is a bad idea. I do understand there's entirely too many people here on the earth. Unfortunately, there's too many people who have this sort of evil mentality, and it's these people that I'm talking about. It is these people that need to get culled from population. Now, the name calling of woke is to distract and confuse you while allowing them to hide their agenda, which is, this case, very sinister. So I was the person who was woke. I don't know why I keep getting this feeling, but I do believe intuitively that there are newsreels about me. I do not know how they cover this, okay? What I'm assuming is there's a very low number of viewers on my channel. This is probably what they write about. They might summarize some of the videos that I put out, and then I don't know how they do that, okay? But I do believe that, I have been described in the past, okay? At least I do sense that there's peace in among these people, but I'm trying to let people understand any sort of campaign that is aimed at another person should not be enacted in public, nor should it be this big, okay? These sort of bullying things, okay? So the woke culture, I don't know. That's my definition of being awake or being aware, is knowing the foundation of things, how they started, where they originated. And if it's not true and in line with the original purpose, then that's a conflict. And it raises red flags to me. And therefore, I usually either choose I make my decisions based on fact. Okay? That's how I am. Okay? And I do believe that that's the best way of running society. Okay? Also, no, in my case, this is how I feel. I said, no, there were no gas ovens, but I wonder if that would have been more humane to just kill someone than to torture them in every aspect of their lives, such as what they have done with me. Okay? What they did to me is just an absolute shame, and I do believe that there's some celebrities who probably have experienced even worse. Okay? They want to feel like somebody is supposed to worship their bloodline or somehow bend down to and respect them and give up their lives for them. Okay, this is clearly distorted, clearly wrong. Okay, now this is important because we're talking about cloning. Okay, and I'm somebody, because you have never provided any sort of positive earth platform to bring people back here is hellish. It's wrong. Okay, unless of course you have something to offer, and at this point, for the very longest time, you have offered people nothing. Okay, and I do understand, even though I am somebody who, because I've dealt with only negative things of being a clone, I'm somebody who doesn't seem like I'm as ecstatic about the whole thing. But I do think that it could be used for good. For example, the people who do want to continue to come back. Okay, so great. If that's the case, then the Earth needs to operate in a pleasurable vibration. It needs to be pleasurable for people who choose earthly life. Okay, whether they're immortals or whatever, or they continue to clone themselves They need to have a place where people function and operate in a state of peace, contentment, and joy. Okay. Otherwise, they're going up. Evil's going to creep in, and it's going to continue to be the same way. So this also has a lot to do with law enforcement. Okay, because people who deviate from being a peaceful person, minding their own business, tending to the things they're supposed to, they're going to create some sort of upheaval, and that's where the law enforcement comes in. They need to be able to realize what constitutes an actual crime. Okay, things like stealing, slander, these sort of things. It depends on how much they escalate and to what degree they are. Okay, but a law enforcement needs also to be re-educated, and I'm hoping to do that with the moral reset. Okay. Also, I will have a form of mental illness for the rest of my life, mainly because they allow my issue to go unresolved for their benefit. Okay, this is a group of people who were such traditionalists. Okay, and possibly, when people started like focusing on higher learning, they probably were the ones who poo-pooed the idea of psychology, right? Because I know religion and psychology were kind of a debatable thing at certain parts of history, mainly because it conflicted with the religious agenda. And there's a lot of people who had the mindset of people like the Mormon Church or similar, where they wanted to dominate people, okay? And that is not bringing a peaceful vibration upon the earth. In fact, it has caused people to commit suicide, to give up on life, to be careless about their lives, don't even care anymore, to bed rot. That's the only activity that they ever do because they don't care anymore. Okay? It's been a very poor maintenance and running of the earth for a very, very long time. So anyway, yeah, this video, I was prompted to make it because I wanted to talk a little bit about knowing the signs of evil, and that this is the biggest step to a better life on earth, to have the understanding that what is evil. We talk about evil, but what exactly is it? What is it? How does it affect society? How does it creep in? How do we prevent it? And how do we extract it if necessary, if it cannot be reformed? There's some people who have been ignorant and evil all their life. Why? Because they honestly have been convinced through brainwashing that this was the only way to live. Okay, they wondered, how do I get out of this? I mean, I'm so deep in it. How can I get out? I don't understand. Because a lot of it is the dual brain programming. They make things very difficult for certain people, and then they make it very taboo to talk about it. I would say marriage is a good example. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I'm a family person. Ideally, we would like to have a child and have, the love of both parents. I think that's understandable. Okay, but we do know that the Mormon and other churches have promoted false marriages or forced marriages where people are not compatible, and nor do they have the same idea of their life journey. Okay, so what happens? The Mormon Church or other religions like that, decide what the life journey is. There's tremendous, tension among the married couples because they are not compatible in any way. And then there's pressure on them to have children, and then all of a sudden their lives are an absolute nightmare. Meanwhile, there's really no solution to their pain. They were encouraged full on to do these things, right? But they're not getting any help or any sort of real assistance on how to manage the problem. Okay, and it is a problem. And where it becomes the mental nightmare is because they have glamorized and glorified the idea of marriage and calling it sacred, when we know that this is not true. It is not sacred when women walk around with black eyes. It is not sacred when women are sitting here homeless or trying to find a job only to be told that she can't find one because her husband is playing games with her. Okay? So, and it makes it difficult to talk about the real problem because, marriages are supposed to be sacred. If you talk about having kids and feeling you struggle with dealing with it because you really realize now that you were talked into it that you don't really have a maternal instinct, and sometimes you're abusing your kid because you were so pressured to have, to please your church, that you ended up doing something very serious as to bringing someone's life into this world. And now you don't know what to deal with it because you don't really have any real parental attachment to your kid. And why would you?
And it's a very serious issue, okay, because there's a lot of neglected kids. So now what's going to happen? Oh, you followed the orders. You did everything right, but you're not really feeling right. And you do everything you possibly can to make it right. And so sometimes, you see somebody who's living a little bit different and it pisses people off. They encourage the person to be bullied. They encourage bullying because they have encouraged people to walk off an edge and literally do destructive things in their life. So my thing is, let's pick up from where we left off and let's make the best out of the situation. Let's be honest about the situation that has been created and try to make it better. Okay, so anyway, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Also, oh wait, one more thing. You know me, I'm always like having something else to say. Religion and law. There's religious law and there is secular law. Okay, secular law protects religion. Religion does not supersede secular law. Okay, meaning the laws that we have on the books are meant to protect your right to practice your religion. Okay, but you overstep a boundary, okay, when you force your religion onto somebody else in the manner that you do. So we need to start thinking about, are things more, what kind of agenda is going on here? You know what I mean? I have a lot of respect for secular laws because it's to me, it's fair. Okay, people do have the right to practice their religion. Mind you, if you are a person who is religious and you have a certain religious doctrine, if your child becomes 18 years old and they want to leave that religion, they have every right to do that. And it might break your heart or whatever, but the goal is to live your religious life in a way that your child does not want to leave that religion. Okay, so that's something that you're going to have to work out with your own family. Okay, but that's the law. Okay, so people need to start thinking about how they're going to be structuring their families and start talking about these sort of things, because that's how families are built in the first place. You need to understand why you're here in the first place and what your family stands for. So anyway, yeah, I know that I've been referred to as woke in the past, and like I said, I am not somebody who's like, nonchalant or somebody who doesn't care or whatever. I at one time felt that as though I needed to play the person who just wanted to live off in isolation because I could not handle the large amount of evil. But now that this has happened, I do understand, who it was. And before, I have to say that I knew that Freemasonry was attached to a lot of the evil, and the reason why they were attached to it is because we have violators such as the Mormon Church. This is not me taking a dig, I'm just talking about how this sort of stuff happens. So we need to watch things like this when it creeps into government. All right, I am wrapping up this video. I'm going to have something to eat. I'm headed to the library, and I'll be back with another video sometime later. Take care. Bye-bye.